My name is Natalie Brennan. I am 36 years old. And the moment my marriage ended was not the moment I found out my husband was cheating. It was the moment I heard him say it. I was standing in the doorway of our laundry room at 6:42 on a Thursday evening, holding a basket of folded towels, and through the wall I could hear his voice in the kitchen. Low, intimate, the particular register he used when he thought no one else was listening. He said, "She's too clueless to catch us." And then I heard her laugh. I set the laundry basket down on top of the dryer. I did not cry. I did not move. I stood in that laundry room with the smell of fabric softener and the sound of my own heartbeat, and I thought about the smart camera system I had installed 3 weeks earlier. The one synced directly to our family group chat, the one my husband had helped me set up, without once reading the notification settings. And I felt something that was not grief and was not rage. It was the specific, clarifying sensation of understanding exactly what you are going to do next. This is that story. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something. Where in the world are you watching or listening to this right now, and what time is it there? Drop your city and local time in the comments below. I genuinely love knowing where these stories land. Whether it is a Thursday morning in Toronto or a late Sunday night somewhere in the UK, with a glass of wine that has been sitting untouched for 20 minutes. I want to know. And if you connect with stories about women who were underestimated by the person who slept beside them, women who said nothing, documented everything, and walked away with every single thing that was theirs, hit like, hit subscribe, and stay with me. This one has been living in my chest for 2 years, and I am finally ready to put it into words. My full name is Natalie Ann Brennan, born Natalie Ann Kowalski. I grew up in Naperville, Illinois, the older of 2 daughters, of a woman named Carol, who taught high school English for 27 years, and a man named Frank, who installed industrial flooring for 31, and who came home every Friday evening and said the same thing when he walked through the door. Another week, another miracle. I grew up in a house where the television stayed off during dinner, and people were expected to mean what they said, and where my mother had a particular phrase she used when one of us tried to get away with something. "I see you." 2 words. She said them without anger and without accusation, just as a statement of fact. "I see you." It was the most clarifying thing I have ever heard, and I have carried it my entire adult life. I met my husband, I will use his name, because I am no longer interested in protecting it. I met Daniel Brennan when we were both 26 years old at a mutual friend's birthday dinner in Chicago. He was tall, funny in a physical way, the kind of person who fills a room without trying to. He worked in commercial real estate, had a good handshake and better shoes, and paid attention to people when they spoke in a way that felt rare at 26. We dated for 2 years. We got engaged at a vineyard in Galena that he had rented specifically for the occasion. We were married in September of the year I turned 29, at a venue in the western suburbs with 200 guests, and a reception that my mother said was the most beautiful thing she had ever been to. I believed, on that September day, that I knew exactly who I had married. That is the sentence I have spent the last 2 years learning the full meaning of. Daniel Brennan was, and I want to be precise about this, a good husband, in the ways that are easiest to be good. He was reliable. He came home at a consistent hour. He remembered anniversaries. He brought me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings without being asked. He made people like him, without apparent effort. He was also, I understand now, a person who had organized his entire interior life around the management of other people's perceptions of him. Everything Daniel did was in relationship to an audience. The coffee on Sunday mornings was not for me. It was for the version of himself that brought his wife coffee on Sunday mornings. The distinction is subtle, but it is not small, and once you see it, you cannot stop seeing it. I see you, as my mother would say. I want to give you a more complete picture of Daniel's pattern, because I think the truth of people is always in the pattern rather than in any single incident, and I want to be accurate. Daniel was a person who told stories. Not lies, exactly, at least not always, but stories, versions of events that had been shaped to serve a purpose. He told them smoothly, naturally, with the specific confidence of someone who had never been seriously questioned. At dinner parties, he was the one everyone leaned toward. He had a way of arriving at the end of a story, just as the room was fully attentive, a kind of timing that I had once found charming, and that I now understand was a practiced skill rather than a natural one. He told stories about himself as the protagonist in ways that the people around him never challenged, because the stories were good and because no one had the information to contradict them. What I understand now is that the management of his image extended to me as well. I was part of the story Daniel told about himself. The marketing director wife, the nice house, the Sunday morning coffee, these were elements of a character he had built, and my role was to be present in the way that supporting characters are present. Visible enough to establish the setting, not prominent enough to complicate the narrative. He was not cruel in this. He did not demean me or dismiss me loudly. He simply arranged things so that the story always returned to him. And I, who was raised by a woman who said "I see you," had been too polite to name the arrangement out loud. I see you too, Daniel. That is precisely the problem. He had also, I noticed in retrospect, a particular way of receiving credit that was different from the way he gave it. When something went well in our shared life, a dinner party that came together beautifully, a vacation that was exactly right, a home repair that resolved a problem we had been living with, Daniel received the credit in the same way a man accepts a handshake, naturally, fully, without needing to redistribute it. When something did not go well, the reverse was equally natural. The distribution of responsibility always found its way toward whoever was not Daniel. I had watched this pattern for 7 years and had named it, privately, as a character quirk rather than a character flaw. Looking back, I understand that the distance between quirk and flaw is only apparent until the stakes are high enough to make the distinction matter. We had been married for 6 years when the camera system entered the story. We lived in a 4-bedroom house in a suburb of Indianapolis, a neighborhood of clean sidewalks and 2-car garages, and neighbors who waved at each other and asked about each other's dogs by name. The house was in both our names. Daniel had a corner office at a commercial real estate firm called Meridian Partners and was making, at the time of this story, somewhere between $240,000 and $260,000 a year depending on commissions. I was the director of marketing for a regional healthcare network and made $118,000, which I mention because the economics of our marriage matter to what comes later. I am a person who believes in knowing the numbers. I have always been a person who believes in knowing the numbers. The camera system was my idea, and I want to be transparent about why I installed it, because the why matters. I had not installed it to catch Daniel, I want to say that clearly. I installed it because we had had a package theft incident in October. A delivery from a furniture store had disappeared off the front porch, and the neighbor 3 houses down had reported a similar theft the same week. Our neighborhood association had sent an email recommending doorbell cameras and interior cameras as a deterrent. I bought a 4-camera Arlo system in November. I set up the front door camera, the back door camera, the garage, and the kitchen. The kitchen because it had the largest window facing the backyard and had been the point of entry for a home invasion 3 blocks away the previous spring, which our neighbor Janet had told me about in the kind of detail that lodged in the memory. I set up the app on my phone. I synced the system to our home's Wi-Fi. And then, because the system offered a family sharing feature, and because Daniel had asked to have access so he could check the front door when he was expecting deliveries, I added him to the account. What I did not do, what I set up in the initial configuration without fully registering its implications, was enable the automatic clip sharing feature that sent motion-triggered clips to a group notification list. And the notification list I had used, because it was the first group in my contacts, was the family group chat, my phone, Daniel's phone, my mother Carol's phone, my sister Rachel's phone, and Daniel's mother Donna's phone. 5 recipients, all receiving automatic clips whenever motion was detected in any of the 4 camera zones. I had set this up on a Sunday afternoon in November while Daniel was watching football and had not thought about it again until the Thursday in February, when it became the only thing that mattered. I need to tell you about the weeks before the Thursday, because the story requires that context, and because I think the context is important for anyone who recognizes what I am about to describe. For approximately 6 weeks before the camera incident, I had been aware that something in Daniel was different. I do not mean dramatically different. I mean different in the way that a room is different when a single lamp has been switched off in the far corner. The overall light is the same. The room functions. But there is a quality of shadow that was not there before, and you find yourself orienting toward it without quite knowing why. Daniel was on his phone more often, but in the specific way of someone who has shifted their primary attention to another window, not checking exactly, but tending. He was home at the same times, but present at different frequencies. He laughed at things he said to me more than at things I said to him. He had started going to the gym on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, which was new, though not impossible to explain on its own terms. I want to be careful here. I am a precise person, and I want to be honest with you. I did not know. I suspected. The way you suspect something, when the pattern of a person shifts in ways that don't quite add up, but I had no evidence. What I had was the accumulating weight of small things, and a mother's voice in the back of my head saying, "I see you," not to Daniel, but to me, telling me to pay attention, telling me that the thing I was half seeing deserved to be looked at fully. The woman's name was Amanda Foss. She was 32 years old, a colleague of Daniel's at Meridian Partners, a junior associate in the commercial leasing division. I did not know her name at the time of the Thursday incident. I learned it afterward, through a combination of the camera footage, my own research, and a conversation with Daniel that I will get to. Amanda was not, as far as I could determine, a person who had engineered this situation out of malice. She was a person who had made a series of choices that had consequences she had not fully modeled. That is not my compassion speaking. That is my accountant's precision speaking. I try to be accurate about people. On the Thursday in February, I left my office at 4:45 in the afternoon because I had a migraine developing behind my right eye, and my assistant had a doctor's appointment, and there was nothing on my calendar that couldn't move. I drove home. I arrived at 5:58. I pulled into the garage. Daniel's car was not in the driveway or the garage, which was not unusual. He often worked until 6:30 or 7 on weekdays. I went inside, through the garage door, put my bag down in the mudroom, took 2 ibuprofen at the kitchen sink, and then went to the laundry room to swap the load I had left in the washer that morning. I transferred the wet clothes to the dryer, started it, and then began folding the previous dry load from the basket on top. At 6:37, I heard the door from the garage open. I heard Daniel's voice, which meant he had come home while I was in the laundry room, a room that, because of the garage layout, he could not have seen into when he entered. I started to call out. I don't know exactly why I didn't. Possibly because the migraine was still pressing at my right eye and I didn't want to raise my voice. Possibly because something in the register of his voice made me pause. That same lamp in the corner quality, present before he said anything specific. He was talking on the phone, I thought at first, and then I heard the second voice and understood he was not on the phone. The conversation in the kitchen lasted approximately 4 minutes before the sentence that changed everything. I could hear pieces of it. Laughter, the sound of the refrigerator opening, the clink of glasses. They were comfortable. They had been in this kitchen before, in this mode, with this level of ease. And then I heard her say something I couldn't fully catch, and I heard Daniel say, in that low, warm voice, the voice he used when he wanted to sound secure and clever, "She's too clueless to catch us." And she laughed, the specific laugh of someone who finds that assessment both funny and reassuring. I felt, in that moment, a complete absence of the emotions I would have predicted. No tears, no impulse to walk into the kitchen, no trembling. Just the laundry basket, and the smell of fabric softener, and the camera notification I had heard ping on my phone approximately 8 minutes earlier when I had been in the garage. The notification I had not yet opened. I finished folding the towels, I stacked them carefully. Then I picked up my phone, and I opened the camera app, and I looked at the clip that had arrived in the family group chat at 6:38 in the evening, sent automatically by the Arlo system to all 5 group members the moment it detected motion in the kitchen. The clip was 14 seconds long. It showed Daniel walking into the kitchen through the garage door with his hand at the small of a woman's back. The resolution was excellent. The timestamp was visible. I watched it once. Then I went quietly upstairs to the guest room, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and began making a list on the Notes app on my phone. I need to pause here for just a moment, because I imagine some of you are watching this right now, and the recognition in your chest is making it hard to sit still. If you have ever been in a room, a laundry room, a hallway, a bathroom with the door locked, while the person you trusted was on the other side of a wall, demonstrating exactly how little they thought of you, drop a comment below. Just tell me you've been in that room, and if you want to know what I put on that list and what I did with it over the following 6 weeks, stay with me and subscribe. Because this is where the story actually begins. The list I made on my phone that night had 6 items on it. 1. Document everything. 2. Speak to no one except an attorney. 3. Understand the finances in full before any conversation with Daniel. 4. Do not change my behavior. 5. Do not let him know I know. 6. Wait for the right moment. I read the list twice, put the phone face down on the bed, and lay in the dark guest room until I heard Daniel come upstairs and go into our bedroom. He knocked on the guest room door at 7:43. He said, "Hey, Nat. I didn't know you were home. You okay?" I said, "Migraine. Going to sleep early." He said, "Do you need anything?" I said, "No, I'm fine." He said, "Okay, feel better." And then I heard his footsteps down the hall to our bedroom, and the sound of the shower, and the ordinary noise of a man ending his evening, without the slightest idea that his wife was in the next room with a phone in her hand, and a clarity she had never felt before. I called my attorney the next morning at 8:17. Her name was Patricia Nguyen, and she had been recommended to me 3 years earlier by a colleague whose divorce had been handled with, in her words, surgical precision. Patricia's office was in downtown Indianapolis. I had never had occasion to use her, but I had kept her number because, and I want to be honest about this, at some level, in some part of myself I had not directly examined, I had understood that I might need it. Patricia answered on the 3rd ring. I said, "I need to make an appointment. My marriage is over, and I want to understand my position before I say a word to my husband." Patricia said, "Can you come in tomorrow?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Bring everything. Tax returns, joint accounts, property documents, anything you can access." I said, "I already have a folder." I did have a folder. Not from before Thursday. I want to be clear about that. But because from the moment I made the list on the guest room bed, I had begun moving with the specificity that comes from being a director of marketing who has run 6-figure campaigns and knows that preparation precedes everything. Over Friday and Saturday, while Daniel was doing the things Daniel did on weekends, the gym, the hardware store, the 2-hour stretches on his phone that I now understood differently, I pulled copies of our joint tax returns for the last 4 years, our mortgage documents, our investment account statements, our retirement account balances, the title documents for both cars, and a detailed accounting of the accounts I had co-signed that were primarily funded by my income. I also documented, carefully and with timestamps, every camera clip that had arrived in the family group chat notification system since November. There were 11 clips in total. The kitchen camera had captured Amanda Foss on 3 separate Thursdays. The first was in December, during a window I had been at a company holiday event. The second was in January, during a week I had been in Columbus for a conference. The third was the Thursday of the migraine. Each clip had been delivered automatically to all 5 members of the family group chat. I did not know, at that point, whether anyone else had seen them. I would find that out in a way I had not planned. The 5 weeks between the laundry room and the kitchen table conversation were among the most instructive of my life, and not only in the legal and financial sense. They taught me something about the relationship between knowledge and action that I carry with me still. Knowledge, I learned, is not the same as readiness. I had knowledge from the moment I heard his voice through the wall. What I spent 5 weeks building was readiness. And readiness is a different thing entirely. Readiness is documentation and legal preparation and financial clarity, yes, but it is also the quieter interior work of deciding who you are going to be when the moment comes. I did not want to be the woman who fell apart. Not because falling apart is shameful, it is not, but because I had fallen apart privately, in small increments over the previous 6 weeks of half-seeing and not examining, and I had used up my falling apart already. What I had left, once the clarity arrived in the laundry room, was something harder and calmer and more durable than grief. I went to work every day during those 5 weeks. I ran a campaign launch for a new urgent care network rollout that required 3 vendor calls a day and a presentation to the executive team on a Friday. I made dinner 3 nights a week. I went to my book club on a Thursday in late February. I did all of these things with what my colleagues would have described as my normal level of competence and engagement, because I am a person who was trained, from a very young age, to maintain function under pressure. My mother did not raise daughters who performed crisis. She raised daughters who documented it. Patricia Nguyen was everything my colleague had promised. She was 51 years old, compact and precise, with the kind of energy that operates at a constant low hum and does not waste itself on things that are not relevant. We met on a Saturday morning. I laid out the folder and the phone and the camera clips, and she went through everything without expression. When she finished, she looked up and said, "You are in an excellent position." I said, "Tell me why." She said, "Because you have documentation, you have equal or primary financial contribution to the marital assets, you have no children complicating the division, and the other party has given you leverage." I said, "The camera clips." She said, "The camera clips and everything else. In Indiana, marital misconduct can influence asset division in certain circumstances. But more immediately, your husband is about to negotiate against a woman who knows more than he thinks she does. That is always the stronger position." I thanked her. I drove home. I stopped at the grocery store on the way and bought the specific brand of pasta Daniel liked for dinner, because I was not changing my behavior. I also called my mother that evening. Carol Kowalski, 63 years old, retired English teacher, the woman who said "I see you" and meant it as a life instruction. I called her from my car in the driveway, and I told her everything. She was quiet for a longer time than I expected. Then she said, "Have you looked at the group chat?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Natalie, the camera sends clips to the group chat. I have been receiving them." Another silence, during which the entire architecture of the situation rearranged itself around a detail I had not considered. "How long?" I asked. "Since the first one in December," my mother said. "I thought the first one was a wrong number. Some kind of glitch. Then the second one came in January, and I could see him clearly, and I didn't know what to do. I was waiting for you to tell me." I sat in the driveway with the engine off for a long time. "Rachel?" I said. "My sister." "I don't know," my mother said. "And Donna." Donna was Daniel's mother. His mother had been receiving the clips too. That detail, Daniel's mother receiving automated camera clips of her son walking into his marital home with another woman, is the one that still strikes me as the most remarkable in the story, not because I arranged it, but precisely because I did not. I had set up a notification list on a Sunday afternoon without reading the settings, and the machine had done the rest with a completeness that I could not have designed. When my mother said Donna's name, I heard in the background of that driveway the faint sound of something my husband had constructed very carefully for 36 years. His image, his reputation, the story of himself as a man who was reliable and charming and good, beginning to come apart at a seam he had not known existed. I want to tell you what happened with Donna, because it is an important part of the story, and because Donna Brennan is a woman I want to be accurate about. She was 65 years old. She had been widowed 8 years earlier. She lived alone in a condo in Carmel, Indiana, and she had, for the entirety of my marriage to Daniel, been a kind and reasonable mother-in-law, present without being intrusive, warm without being strategic. She called me on the Sunday after I had spoken to my mother. She said, "Natalie, I need to talk to you." Her voice had the quality of a woman who has been holding something for 2 months and has decided she can no longer hold it. "I know," I said. She said, "I didn't know what to do. He's my son." I said, "I know that too." She said, "I'm sorry." Those 2 words, from Donna, were the only apology in this entire story that arrived without conditions or calculation. I told her that. She cried briefly. I told her I did not blame her, and that I meant it. We talked for 40 minutes. At the end of the conversation, she said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to let him show me who he is." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He's already shown you." She was right. My sister Rachel had seen the clips but had assumed, in the way of a younger sibling who does not want to believe something difficult, that there was an innocent explanation. When I called her on Monday, she was at her desk at work, and she went silent in the specific way of someone who has just had a suspicion confirmed that they had been hoping was wrong. "I wanted to ask you," she said. "I almost called you in January, but I thought maybe she was a colleague or a friend." I said, "She is a colleague." Rachel said, "Natalie?" I said, "I know." She said, "What do you need from me?" I said, "Right now, nothing. But I need you to not say anything to anyone until I tell you the time has come." She said, "Okay." She said it immediately, without qualification, which is the kind of answer that reminds you why your sister is your sister. The following 3 weeks were the most precise work I have ever done in my life, and I am a person who manages multi-million-dollar marketing campaigns for a living, so I am not using that phrase casually. Patricia and I met 4 times. We mapped the marital assets in complete detail. I gathered account numbers, property valuations, retirement balances, the business equity in Daniel's stake at Meridian Partners, which, under Indiana's equitable distribution law, was subject to division. Patricia had a forensic accountant review the documents. The forensic accountant found 3 things I had not known. A savings account Daniel had opened in his name only 18 months earlier with a balance of $41,000, a transfer of $22,000 from a joint investment account to that individual account 6 months prior, and a pattern of personal expenses on a business credit card that was held jointly, but whose statements had been going to his office address rather than our home. Patricia was not surprised by any of this. She said, "In my experience, when people believe they are operating without accountability, they get sloppy." She looked at the camera clip on my phone. "He told you as much himself." I want to tell you about the moment Daniel found out that I knew, because it did not happen the way he would have expected it to. By the time I was ready to have the conversation, it was mid-March. Patricia had the filing prepared. I had moved a portion of my direct deposit to an individual account, as Patricia had advised. I had documented everything. I had spoken to no one except my attorney, my mother, my sister, and Donna. And then, on a Wednesday evening after dinner, I sat across from Daniel at the kitchen table and I said, simply, "I want to talk to you about the camera system." He looked up from his phone. He said, "The cameras? Is something wrong with one of them?" He was not afraid yet. He was the version of himself that brings coffee on Sunday mornings, composed, attentive, managing the presentation. I said, "No, they're working perfectly. The notification system has been working perfectly since November, actually. All the clips go to the family group chat automatically." I watched his face move through a sequence I had anticipated and had still not fully prepared myself for. It went from neutral to confused to calculating to understanding in approximately 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a long time to watch a person's face, I counted. "The group chat," he said. His voice was very flat. "All 5 members," I said. "Your phone, mine, my mom's, Rachel's, and your mom's. Since November." He did not speak. "Your mom called me on Sunday," I said. "She's known since December." He set his phone, face down, on the table. The gesture was so familiar. The phone going face down, the particular way he did it when he was done with a conversation, that I felt, for the first time in this entire sequence, a brief and sharp wave of grief. Not for the marriage. For the version of the man I had thought I was married to, the one who had not existed in the form I believed, the one I was finally and completely done waiting to find. "Natalie," he said. I said, "Don't. Patricia Nguyen has the filing ready. You'll receive it through your attorney, whose number I assume you have. I'll be staying with my mother for the next 2 weeks, and I would ask that you use that time to begin making alternative arrangements." He started to speak 3 more times. I did not interrupt him. I simply waited for each start to end, and each one did, because there was nothing he could say that restructured what I knew, and nothing I needed to hear that he was capable of providing. I picked up my phone, stood up from the kitchen table, and walked to the mudroom where my bag was already packed. I had packed it the previous afternoon. What I did not expect, and I want to be honest that this was the one element I had not fully planned, was the conversation between Daniel and his mother that happened the following day. Donna told me about it 2 weeks later, during a lunch she initiated. She said Daniel had called her and said, "You could have warned me." She said she had told him, "I did warn you. The camera warned you. The only reason it didn't reach you is because you decided you were dealing with someone who couldn't see you." She told me she had quoted my mother without knowing she was quoting her. "I see you. It traveled," that phrase. It is still traveling. The divorce settlement took 5 months. Indiana operates under equitable distribution principles, meaning the court aims for a fair rather than automatically equal division, and Patricia's preparation meant we entered that process with documentation that made fair look a great deal like what I had contributed. The marital home was sold, and the proceeds were split 60-40 in my favor after the court considered Daniel's individual savings account and the undisclosed transfers. The individual account itself was included in the marital estate, as the court found that assets acquired during the marriage from marital income are marital property, regardless of how they are titled. The retirement accounts were divided. Daniel's stake in Meridian Partners was valued by an independent assessor, and I received a compensatory payment equivalent to half its assessed value. The business credit card charges were considered when calculating the settlement. Patricia was thorough. The forensic accountant was thorough. I was thorough. Daniel's attorney told Patricia, in a message that Patricia relayed to me with characteristic understatement, that his client had not anticipated the level of documentation. I imagine not. I want to tell you something about the aftermath that I think is important, because the story does not end with the settlement, and I believe the part after the settlement is the part that actually matters. I moved back to the Indianapolis area, into an apartment in Broad Ripple, a neighborhood I had always liked, and that felt, in its particular combination of the familiar and the new, like exactly the right place to begin the next thing. I had my job, which I was good at. I had my mother, who called every Sunday, and sometimes on Thursdays, just to say she was thinking about me. I had Rachel, who had moved to Chicago after graduate school, and who came to visit in May, with a bottle of very good Prosecco, and absolutely no agenda. I had Donna Brennan, who I saw for coffee every few weeks and with whom I had developed, in the strange aftermath of everything, the kind of friendship that does not fit neatly into any category but is real and reciprocal and does not require explanation. There is one more thing I want to tell you about the aftermath, and it is the thing I am most glad happened, though I did not see it coming. About 4 months after the settlement, I was asked by my company to lead a full rebrand initiative, the largest marketing project the organization had undertaken in 15 years. It was a promotion in everything but title, and the title followed 6 months later, Vice President of Brand Strategy. I tell you this not to measure my recovery in professional terms. Recovery is not professional, it is internal, but because of what leading that project required of me. It required me to sit at the head of a table and advocate for a vision in a room full of skeptics, and to do it with the specific combination of evidence and confidence that makes a case. It required me to be, without any performance or apology, the most informed person in the room. And I was. Not because I had become something new. I also want to say something about the specific experience of not changing your behavior while you know something the other person does not. I had read, somewhere, that this is the hardest part of the preparation period, maintaining the ordinary rhythm of a shared life while carrying knowledge that makes the ordinariness surreal. What I found was that it was not hard in the way I expected. It was clarifying. Every ordinary moment, dinner, television, Saturday errands, was simply what it was, stripped of the layered interpretation I had been unconsciously applying for years. The marriage, seen clearly and finally, was not a tragedy. It was just a thing that was ending. That made it, surprisingly, easier to be present for. But because I had finally stopped arranging myself around the requirement that I not be too much, not be too capable, not be too visible. The professional and the personal turns out to be the same turn. You stop managing someone else's comfort at the expense of your own truth, and suddenly you find out how much of your energy was going toward the management. It is a considerable amount. I am doing things with that energy now that I am proud of, and I intend to keep doing them. I also had a thing I had not expected, which was a significant amount of time and quiet in which to be honest with myself. And the honesty I arrived at over those months was this. I had known something was wrong for longer than 6 weeks before the laundry room. I had known something was wrong for perhaps 2 years, not specifically, not provably, but in the way of things you choose not to examine because the examination costs too much. I had been busy. My career was demanding. The life Daniel and I had built together was comfortable and recognizable and required a great deal of maintenance. And I had poured myself into the maintenance without asking whether what I was maintaining was real. That is not self-blame. I want to be precise about that. What I did was not stupid or weak. It was a form of hope, and hope is not a character flaw. But there comes a time, in my experience, when hope has to be replaced by honesty, and the laundry room was my time. Daniel and I have not spoken since the Tuesday I collected the last of my belongings from the house. He texted me once, about 8 months after the settlement, to say he hoped I was doing well. I read the message. I did not respond. Not from cruelty. I genuinely do not feel cruelty toward him, which surprised me and took some time to fully believe. but because there was nothing in that text that required an answer from me and nothing I wanted to add to the record. Amanda Foss left Meridian Partners 6 months after the settlement. I know this because Donna told me, not with any particular satisfaction, just as information. What her life looks like now is her business, and not mine, and I spend very little time thinking about it. This is not the story where the other woman is the villain. Daniel is responsible for what Daniel did. That is the only precision I require. The camera system, for what it is worth, is still active in my apartment. Front door, back door, the living room. I still have the notification set to my own phone and my mother's. Rachel insisted on being added. When she visits and walks through the front door, the system pings both our phones simultaneously, and Rachel thinks this is funny, and so do I. The family group chat is still the family group chat. It has never, since the divorce, received any clip that contains anything more dramatic than a FedEx delivery or my cat walking across the kitchen counter at 3 a.m. My cat's name is Harold, a name I have borrowed from a story I heard and admired, and he is gray and unhurried and considers himself the most important person in every room, which, honestly, same. I think about what my mother said the first time she saw the clip in December and said nothing, and about the particular act of restraint that represents to see something clearly and to trust that the other person will come to it in their own time, to hold the knowledge without using it as a weapon, to wait. That is a kind of love I have enormous respect for. My mother has always known how to hold things that are not hers to act on. It is something I am still learning. I am getting better at it. What I want to say to you, if you are watching this and the architecture of it feels familiar, if you are the person in the laundry room, or the person who has been receiving the notification and not known what to do with it, or the person who is somewhere in the middle of recognizing something that you have been hoping was wrong, I want to say this: the clarity comes, not always when you expect it and not always in the form you expected, but it comes. And when it does, the most powerful thing you can do is exactly what I did in that laundry room. You finish folding the towels, you pick up your phone, you look at the notification, and you start making a list. Being underestimated by the person who is supposed to know you best is its own particular category of loss. It is not the loss of the relationship alone. It is the loss of the version of yourself that existed inside that relationship, the version that was visible, that was seen, that was accounted for. What I found on the other side of that loss was that the version of me I was trying to get back was never actually present in that marriage in the first place. She was here the whole time, waiting. She just had not been looked at. And now she is running her own apartment and her own finances and her own marketing campaigns and her own notification settings. And when her phone pings with a camera clip, she looks at it herself first, without sending it to a group, because some things you need to see on your own before you share them with anyone. She is too clueless to catch us, he said. I have thought about those words a great many times since the laundry room. I have thought about the specific comfort he took from them, the way he said it to make her feel secure, the way it made her laugh. I think about what those words required him to believe, about me, about the 7 years we'd spent in the same house, about what it means to live alongside a person and arrive at the conclusion that they cannot see. What he had confused was courtesy with ignorance. He had been given the gift of a woman who was too decent to perform her intelligence at his expense, and he had mistaken that decency for blindness. He was not the first person to make that mistake, and he will not be the last. But he is the last person who will make it about me. I am 36 years old. I live in Broad Ripple with a gray cat named Harold, who walks across my keyboard at the worst possible moments and is completely unrepentant about it. My mother calls every Sunday. My sister visited last month. Donna Brennan and I had coffee on a Tuesday in October and talked for 2 hours about books and the particular quality of light in Indianapolis in autumn, and absolutely nothing about Daniel. It was one of the better Tuesday afternoons I have had in years. I have a job I am very good at, a settlement that reflects what I contributed, and the knowledge, bone deep, unshakable, that I was never clueless. I was patient. The difference is vast. Thank you for sitting with this one. I know it was a slow burn, and I know it asked something of you. It was worth something to me to tell it. Drop a comment below and tell me this. Have you ever been called clueless or naive or too trusting by someone who needed you to be those things to justify what they were doing? Tell me about it. I want to hear. Hit subscribe because there are more of these stories, and every single one of them belongs to a woman who was underestimated and who finished folding the towels first. I will see you in the next one.